Hello, everybody, and welcome to probably the best day of the essay writing process. I'm sure most of you would agree. Today we are doing the conclusion for our freedom essay. We've worked very hard, put our quotes in, properly cited them, annotated them in paragraph form. Now it's time to just wrap it up. I want to say a couple of things about conclusions. One, for some reason, people get very nervous about writing conclusions. They make a big giant deal about it, and really there is nothing to worry about. You have done all your hard work. For some reason, students oftentimes do one of two things, which ends up losing them 10 points off the essay. They've worked so hard. One is just simply not even giving a conclusion at all. They just end the paper. Can't do that. You must conclude it. And two, they copy and paste the introduction and slap it at the end of it. It's unacceptable. You cannot do that. Now, I'll explain to you what to do in a conclusion right now, so pay close attention. It's really very simple, but in a nutshell, all you're really going to do is just restate in a different way your thesis, talk about it, why it's important. In fact, here's something that you can think about. If you're having a problem coming up with an idea about what to write about in a different way for your conclusion, answer this question. Why did you talk about freedom? What was so important about freedom that you wrote about it? And don't say something sarcastic and snide like, well, because my teacher made me. No, really, you've gone through a lot here. And you have probably gave a lot of really great quotes. So why? What is important about freedom specifically today? There's a lot going on in the world and in our country with people fighting for various freedoms. So why is it important to talk about it? That's a really good angle to talk about for your conclusion. You talk about that for 6 or 8 sentences, and you're done. Have a great day. Now, there's a lot of things that I can show you. So let's start right now. I'm going to present to you a tab. Hold on one second, please. And let's go to my conclusion worksheet, as you know. Now, before I even start talking about this, let's talk about what you have done in this essay. Now, remember, you wrote an introduction where you gave no details, no real facts. You just did what you're about to do now for your conclusion. You talked about your thesis in a big way, and then you funneled it down to your thesis statement, which was one of the 2 essay questions. What does it take to be free, or what can one person do to ensure the freedom of everybody in the globe, or everybody, or more than a lot of people. And then you were done. Then you did your first paragraph, and your first paragraph featured, you talked about the thesis again for a sentence or 2. You talked about FDR for a little bit, and then you gave a quote from FDR to answer that question. You opened it up with a quote starter. Consider the following passage. You answered, you finished with a quote finisher, something like this quote clearly shows. And of course, this is important because it's a really great example of one person fighting for their freedom, or someone providing us with an example of what it takes to fight for freedom, something like that. Then you did basically the same thing for your second body paragraph, and that was with a quote from JFK. You talked about how important JFK was, a true freedom fighter who did everything he could. In fact, he died in the quest of fighting for freedom for Americans and for people around the world. And then you gave a quote from his famous inaugural address. Consider the following quote. This quote clearly shows that JFK believed blah, 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 blah freedom, or understood what it took to be free. This quote was, and then this was important because, and then you were done with that. And then you did the great Malala. You gave a quote from Malala, same thing, talked about how Malala is an incredible example of a freedom fighter. Consider the quote, following quote, or here's an excellent quote from Malala's speech. This quote clearly shows this is important because Malala really shows us what it takes to blah, blah, blah. And then you can go from there. Then you did one really great paragraph using any person you chose. I'm excited to read those. Or, of course, any quotes you wanted from A Raisin in the Sun, because that is a great example of what it takes to be free, or what not having freedom can do to you. You can actually talk about it that way, as long as you're citing those quotes correctly. And now it's time for your conclusion. So let's talk essay, Unit 2 essay conclusion. Let's go. So you're going to talk about your thesis in a new way, right? Talk about the importance of freedom and what it takes to gain it. Now, remember, the freedom questionnaire. Let me show that to you very quickly. This is what we did in the beginning. Some people use this as help for their introduction. And there are, if I remember, 11 great questions. Is everyone around the globe free? How long have people been fighting for their freedom? Who deserves to be free? Why do people deserve to be free? Each one of these questions, and you can go through the rest of them if you're looking for something, if you need help, but each one of these questions can itself be a springboard, a starting point for that paragraph. Answer that in one paragraph, and you have your conclusion ready to go, right? So that's one thing that you can do, a really simple idea. to write your conclusion is to answer one of these questions in an entire paragraph. Now, if you chose to answer one of these questions for your introduction, clearly for your conclusion, you will be answering a different question. Or if you want to combine a couple of questions together, that's fine, but make sure it's not one that you answered in the beginning. Let's go back. Hold on. Allow me to share it back with you. So, of course, there are the Freedom Questionnaire. I just showed it to you, where there are tons of great ideas to talk about concerning freedom. Just don't restate what you said in the introduction, please. Now, of course, you can briefly summarize your main points in 2 or 3 sentences. Just explain there are tons of people throughout the history of time who have done this. Just make sure it doesn't sound exactly like it did in your introduction, and don't offer any details. You don't even have to mention the people. Don't say in this essay you read about JFK or FDR. I know that. I just read the essay. You don't have to mention them again, but you can step back and mention again in the broader sense that in history, there have been, luckily, a few brave and courageous people who did what it took and stepped up to fight for freedom. They understood that by doing so, because other people couldn't do it themselves. They understood that weaker or poorer people, or people in different circumstances who didn't know how to fight or were never taught how to fight, could do it. They understood that, you had to stand up for people who were being bullied by other people. They understood that you had to provide an example for people. I don't know, I'm coming up with ideas just like that. So again, don't go into any major details. Just talk about in a broad sense what those people did. So you can do that if you'd like. Now, do not, instead of before, I'm going to say it again. Do not copy your introduction and paste it. Do not just change each sentence, like 1 or 2 sentences. I will look. I do. I read the conclusion. It's really easy. I just scroll back up and I look. And if it's the same, that's 10 points off, because you have to have one. You'll see on the rubric that you have to have an introduction and a conclusion. And if there's no conclusion, and you can't tell me there is a conclusion, because there's not if you've just copied and pasted it. It's not going to happen. So do not simply copy your introduction. Do not focus on any points or details from your essay. Just explain them again. Do not apologize in any way. I may not be an expert, or at least this is my opinion. None of that. You're not apologizing. Do not discuss any new details that were not mentioned in the paper. All right. If you want to know, no details, just big main ideas. Do not explain what you did or are going to do. Now, do not ever say, now I will describe to you. Now it is time for me to conclude this essay I have just told you about. You have just learned. I know what I've just read, so don't tell me what I've just read, please. Okay. And of course, don't include any evidence or quotations. That happened in the body of the paper. You're just talking big ideas here. Now, here's some things you can do. Ask a provocative question relating to your thesis. What would it be like to have no freedom? How would having no freedom affect a person? That's a great question to finish with. Evoke a vivid or powerful image dealing with your thesis. Think about all the powerful things that have happened in history and are happening now regarding people fighting for freedom. I mean, wars, for crying out loud, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and those are just a couple that we were in America. You could go even bigger than that across the globe, across history. People have been fighting for freedom forever. It's a really great way to talk about in your conclusion, by the way. You can call for some sort of action by your reader/humanity. Write a paragraph about the fact that people need to step up and do these things that that certain people do. People need to step up and fight for blank, blank, blank because of these reasons. You can compare it to other situations that occur in life. That's cool. You can suggest results or consequences dealing with your thesis. If we don't do this, and how about the better part? If people do this, then maybe one day we'll have blank. And then, of course, you can end with a warning of some kind, which is basically kind of what I just said. If we don't do this, if people don't stand up, then blank might happen to them. They might be taken over by their government or by their neighbors or by a more powerful country or, a dictatorship. There's so many ways you can go with this. Now, the most important thing to realize now that it's time to do your conclusion is, if you are still stumped, ask me. Shoot me an email. Holler. Mr. Kenny, I still don't have any ideas. I will happily give them to you. I will talk to you about them many. And again, go back to that question that I asked in the beginning. If somebody, imagine if you're sitting around the table and somebody says, hey, why did you write that paper about freedom? And then you might say, well, actually, Dad, I wrote this paper about freedom because it's important to know that there have been these few people who have stepped up and given everything. That's a really great sentence, by the way. It's important to know, it's important for everybody to know that there have been a certain brave, courageous few who have stepped up and given everything in order to fight for the freedom of others. And then talk about that for a paragraph or two. It's very powerful stuff. Thank you very much. Great job on everything. Now, when you're done with your conclusion, by the way, you're not done with your essay. Then it's time to go back and make sure everything is perfect, paragraph by paragraph. Now, in this class, we are going to do that together. But in the future, when you're not with me and you're finishing your conclusion, please don't fall into that trap, which so many students do. And I'm going to have to say I did this as well until I was well through college and almost into graduate school, of just finishing a paper, being like, done. That took forever. I'm all good. And then finishing it and turning it in. Oh, no, no, no. You need to go over that several times. Edit that thing. Think about what authors with books do, or anybody who publishes a magazine article. I mean, if you were going to publish something in a newspaper, wouldn't you go over it several times and make sure it was absolutely perfect? Or if you were going to publish a book, heck, if you were going to publish a book, not only would you go over it several times, you would hire somebody. You would pay a team of people to go over it to make sure there were no mistakes. You need to be just as careful now. Now it's only a 2 or 3 page paper and it's your own writing, so it shouldn't take you so long, but go over it several times. Read through it. Are your citations all correct? Have me look at it before you turn it in. Have you fixed all the errors and fixing that I've done? And can you fix any that you've seen? No singular I's. You don't use the little letter U when you're saying you in a sentence. None of these things like that. So make sure it's all fixed up. When that's done, go over it once, twice more, make sure it's perfect, and then hand it in. And then have a great day. So again, thank you very much for working so hard.